And we begin this hour of KXEL Live and Local by connecting via Zoom with a return guest to the program. He's Michael Swanger. Mr. Swanger is the publisher and owner of Iowa History Journal. They're online at iowahistoryjournal.com. Excellent magazine, 6 issues a year, telling the great stories of Iowa and its people. The new September-October issue is out. Mr. Swanger, good morning, and thank you for taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Jeff, to speak with you. Thanks for having me back on your show.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, the cover photo on this edition is truly an iconic photo, and I will guess everyone listening to this conversation will be able to guess who it is without even looking at the headline next to the photo. Tell us, please.
Well, I certainly hope that they know who this man is, because it is an iconic photo of the great Glenn Miller. And Glenn Miller is a name that is so ubiquitous in terms of Iowa icons. It's difficult to kind of get your arms around his entire life story and legacy in a conversation, let alone a series, which is what we are publishing, a 2-part series that starts with our September-October issue, as you mentioned. It's written by Dennis Sprague, and Dennis is kind of the expert nationwide. Well, I shouldn't say kind of, he is the expert on Glenn Miller. He works at the University of Colorado in Boulder, where he curates a collection of Glenn Miller artifacts. He's also the historian for the Glenn Miller Birthplace Museum Society in Clarinda. The man knows more. Well, he would forget more about Glenn Miller than I would ever know. Let's put it that way.
And this marks the, 120th anniversary of the birth of Glenn Miller, who again was at the absolute peak of his fame as a band leader at the time his country called him to serve in World War II.
You're right, Jeff. And not only does it mark the anniversary of his birth, but it also marks a significant anniversary of his mysterious death. We're approaching the 80th anniversary in December of his mysterious death somewhere in the English Channel while he was serving our nation during World War II. And he died mysteriously. His body was never recovered. It wasn't until some recent research where the plane was actually found. But Dennis, who for many years has done so much research and working with the family to learn so much about his life, also learned a lot about his death. He wrote a book a couple of years ago that I reviewed called Declassified, which was about the mysterious disappearance of Miller and the plane. And he's going to delve into that in the second part of our series in our November-December issue. So I don't want to give too much of that away now. But folks who pick up and read the first part of this series are definitely going to want to read the second part, because I think he does as good a job as anyone at debunking all the conspiracy theories that have surrounded Miller's mysterious death.
And I think that's great, because the tragedy of his passing, the suddenness of it, it almost overshadows the contributions made to music. And so it's very nice that you've got this segmented to where the death can be dealt with all on its own, and you can really celebrate the life and the craft and the art in this first of 2 stories.
I think that's important to discern that, Jeff, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because let's talk about the great things about him, because when you think about all of the Iowa musicians, famous people who were born in this state or who spent some time living in this state, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who had more commercial success, had a greater impact on music, on popular music, than Glenn Miller. So much so, let me put it to you this way, and this is from Dennis's story, where I don't think many people would realize this, that in a 4-year span from 1939 to 1942, he was America's #1 band leader. To put it in perspective, how great he was, there was no one with more #1 records. He had 16 of them, and top 10 hits. He had 69 of them, than either Elvis Presley or the Beatles. Miller topped all of them. So let me say that again. He had more #1 records and more top 10 hits than Elvis Presley or the Beatles. And he accomplished that in that short time period of 1939 to 1942. the song book that he created is incredible. It's iconic. It's one that we all know today. I mean, you think about songs like his best-selling records include his theme song, Moonlight Serenade. The first gold record ever made was Chattanooga Choo Choo. Who doesn't know that song? I mean, they even named a movie after it, where he appears. And there are so many other big hits. He had Pennsylvania 5000, String of Pearls, Moonlight Cocktail, At Last, which was, made popular by Etta James. Well, that was Glenn Miller first. Tuxedo Junction, the list goes on and on and on. And he really, at one point in 1942, he had five number one hits in one year. And he did all this in 4 years. His legacy, his musical legacy, also includes multiple recordings in the Grammy Hall of Fame. It's been covered by swing bands, jazz bands, big bands worldwide for 75 years. That's just the a summary of his commercial success in a nutshell. And we could go on and on about not only that, but also his influence.
Well, and again, as the article points out, number one, with one song or another, unbroken streak for a period of close to 5 months, straddling November of 1941 into March of 1942. Again, you have to think, if it was a trivia question of name the artist that had this unbroken streak, you'd say the Beatles, Elvis, Michael Jackson. No, Glenn Miller. And it was because of the distinctive sound. And again, you're a music historian as well. It was the distinctive sound of this trombone playing leader.
It was. He was a very studied man in terms of music. Just for your listeners who don't know, he was born in 1904 in Clarinda, and he lived there for a short time, and he was really raised in Nebraska, Missouri, and Colorado. But along the way in high school and a brief time that he had in college, he studied music and was very intelligent about it, and he just had a mind for composing and arranging. He understood not only just the notes on the page, but the feel and the sound and the style that was unique. And one of the things that made him unique was in his his civilian band, because you can kind of distinguish his career in two parts: his civilian band and his military band. In his civilian band, he did not have a string section like he did in his military unit, but he did have a slap bass in the rhythm section, which was unusual at the time. So in that regard, he had already kind of set himself apart from many of the other contemporaries of that era, because they did use strings, they did incorporate it. He had a little bit more raw, swinging sound. Of course, he came into his own during the 20s, during the Roaring 20s, when there were so many artists who were playing. He cut his teeth on the road. True to form, he skipped his high school graduation to go play a gig. So you knew he was in it for life. At one point, he was in some of the regional bands he played with in the 20s. He was a bandmate and roommate with a guy named Benny Goodman. And then he went to work in some other regional bands where he crossed paths and started writing and arranging and composing for the Dorsey Brothers. So he had his own sound, his own style. That rubbed off on all these other musicians as well. So it's not just his music that was obviously his own sound that was so incredible, but it's also the influence that he had on all these other musicians. And yeah, you're right. We could go on and on and on in terms of his sound, his style, and obviously there were very few trombone players who were leaders of bands in that era.
And again, very perceptive comment on your part. A lot of us can play the notes, but to feel the music and to convey that through the instrument, that's where the true talent is. And of course, you knew I was going to point out that your author, Dennis, he studied at a pretty good university himself, did he not?
Yeah, he did. He knows music very well. And he's, like I said, he's written so much about Glenn. And when I'd known about his work, I had read his book. He did a presentation earlier in the year for the State Historical Society of Iowa with one of those video presentations. And just to listen to him talk about Glenn is inspiring. I mean, if you weren't familiar with his music, or even even if you were a hardcore fan too, on the other end of the spectrum, it just made you want to dive in and learn more, because he certainly knows what he's talking about.
Dennis Sprague, a 1975 graduate of Iowa State University's journalism school. Glenn Miller, part one of a two-part series of the Clarinda native's life and legacy. Mr. Miller's photo graces the cover of Iowa History Journal, the September-October issue, which is available right now wherever you get your good magazines, and subscription is even better. But if we're going to buy it on the newsstand, as they say, where might we find it?
We're sold at every Barnes & Noble in Iowa, Jeff, as well as most Hy-Vee stores and some independent bookstores. We encourage folks to go to our website to find a list of retailers in their town. But I think the two biggest, easiest places to find them are Barnes & Noble and Hy-Vee.
So when my copy came in the mail, I saw the Glenn Miller image and I thought, well, this will be a treat. But what really struck me was something I did not know about a comedic actress who was a staple of 1980s game shows. And I'm one of these guys who grew up with them, and I still like to watch the Buzzer channel on the Dish Network. And they play the really dreadful Hollywood Squares Match Game Hour, which only lasted about a year in the early 1980s. But one of the prime protagonists on the program was an actress named Nedra Volz. You may not know the name. You will certainly know the photograph. I had no idea she was born in Iowa, Michael.
I didn't either. We have a long list of actresses and actors who were born in Iowa, and her name had popped up to me a while back, and I pitched it to our mutual friend, John Busby, who, of course, jumped all over that because that's in his wheelhouse, our films. And, of course, he was very familiar, and he managed to interview some people who were close to Nedra over the years. So I learned a lot about her. I probably, like you and so many people, once you see her face, you go, oh, sure, I recognize her. She's been in almost everything I've seen growing up. But you might not know her name. You might not know her backstory, at least until now. And she was born in 1908 in the southeast Iowa river town of Montrose. And she grew up studying theater and music. She graduated from East High School in Des Moines. And it was while she was at East that she thought, I think I'll have more success as a singer than I will acting. And so she went into music, and she had a kind of a small music career for a number of years. And then she got married, moved to California, never thought anything about having a life in the entertainment business until she got discovered by a gentleman who was with a local theater going door to door and said, you have a great presence about you. Have you ever tried acting? Well, yeah, I have. And she said, what the heck, let's see what we can do. So she did some community theater. She got quickly discovered, and she made her first movie at the age of 65. Incredible. When you start looking at her credentials and all the TV shows that she was on, just the Norman Lear productions alone in the 70s. I mean, name a Norman Lear show, she was on it.
Oh, very clearly. And that's one of the great things, because, again, and I don't mean it as a bad thing, I think it's a badge of honor as a character actor.
Yes.
You're not typecast, and you can do so many different things. But to your point, Good Times, Maude, Mary Hartman, All in the Family, all the Norman Lear shows that she was on. Then you move on to all of these others that are noted in John Busby's great, well, as always, great article, WKRP, Different Strokes, Dukes of Hazzard. I mean, for crying out loud, she was a staple on the screen and believable in each of these roles. And I'm guessing that had a little bit to do with that Iowa background.
Oh, absolutely. I think she learned quite a bit about just how to be relatable, and also the fact that a lot of her roles were as a nice or old lady or a sassy senior, something to that effect. I think her Midwestern values, her Midwestern appearance, just the way she carried herself, the way she lived her life. She had a very grounded, normal life. And I don't think she had sought fame at all. This is just something that she wanted to do, that she enjoyed. And she came about in the most honest, somewhat naive way. And obviously that had a great appeal to people who made all those shows and to those who watched them.
IowaHistoryJournal.com is the website. You can subscribe there if you like, and you should. And if you want to pick up an extra copy, go to IowaHistoryJournal.com to learn where you can find it. I always find it at Barnes & Noble, typically Hy-Vee as well. Glenn Miller is on the cover. We were just speaking of the Iowa native actress Nedra Volz. And I love the fact that, and I think this is purposeful, I trust on your part, but I've been noticing it more and more. You're giving a lot of first-time authors the chance in some of the issues, and you've got a journalism student at Iowa State who has written a tremendous piece on a legendary college football coach who really cut his teeth in Ames.
One of the goals of owning the magazine over the years, Jeff, as you know, is finding the right person to write a story. Now, I have a stable of talented writers who contribute to the magazine on a regular basis, yourself included. Your listeners know that. Guys like yourself who can write about anything. But there are sometimes when we're looking for a story to be covered, if we can find someone who has a particular interest or knowledge in it, then we try to go that direction. And we did that with a young man, a young writer who's studying journalism at Iowa State University by the name of Payne Blazevich. Full disclosure, he is a friend of my son's. He's a great guy. He's a great young man and his family, and he takes what he's studying very seriously. But he covers sports at Iowa State. He was on the desk for the Iowa State Daily, and he currently is a sports reporter for Cyclone Alert dash 247 Sports. He covers the Cyclones on a daily basis. I know this because while most kids are slacking off during the summer, he's filing stories every day. So it's in his blood. I'm at the point in my career that if I can help out someone who's young in the business and help build their resume or give them an opportunity to be published, I'm all for it. This is not a student-written article by any means. As you know, by reading it, you would have thought it was a veteran sports reporter who wrote this. But
that's actually, by the way, I'm going to interrupt just to make that point. I saw the byline, and I thought, well, I don't recognize the name, read the article, and then saw the credit at the end, and I thought, this is good material, and you wouldn't have put it in here if it wasn't. But I mean, this probably did not take much polishing on your part.
No, it didn't. Payne did a lot of work. I gave him a lot of time to work on it, and he did a lot of research into it. So I'm sure he's blushing by now when he tunes in here. So, but no, Payne did a great job of writing a story about Johnny Majors, who was the head football coach for the Cyclones from 1968 to 1972. And he is credited with establishing the building blocks of Iowa State football. He's the one who laid the groundwork for the success that they're enjoying today. And he did a good job of going over not only just the X and O's of what Johnny did to bring the program into some prominence, but all the people that he surrounded himself. He had a talented cast of assistant coaches, Jimmy Johnson, Bill Parcells, the list goes on, and how he helped bring all these big-time coaching and big-time philosophy to Iowa State. And there's a great quote. At the time, this is when Iowa State was in the Big Eight, and they had had a losing record for several years, and they were up against the top three teams in the nation in their conference every year: Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado. And he got them into prominence in '71 when he got Iowa State to get an 8-win year and secured their first bowl appearance. They lost their bowl game, but it really kind of set the groundwork for what was going to happen down the road. And if it wasn't for Johnny Majors, and Payne has this quote in the story, it's possible that Jack Trice Stadium doesn't get built.
Well, one of the things also to keep in mind, Iowa State had not played in a bowl game until, as you note, the 1971 season. But that was at a time when we did not have 50 different bowl games. There were very few. And obviously, Iowa in the Big Ten had gone to the Rose Bowl in the 1950s, but had not been to, and again, the Big Ten had a rule about how many teams could go to a bowl game, or you only could go to the Rose Bowl or whatever it was. But the point of fact was, Iowa as a state had no team in a bowl game for about a 15-year period until Johnny Major's Cyclones in 1971. That was just huge stuff at a time when, again, you didn't have all of these opportunities. You didn't have to make rules saying a 6-6 team could go to a bowl game because there just weren't that many bowl games. It was just an amazing turnaround there in Ames.
That's a great point, Jeff. And thinking about that, they were the only team to do that for a long period from our state. Well, let's face it, that's when bowl games really meant more. And I think the fact that he got them to that point, especially having to leapfrog over the top 3 teams in the nation who happened to be in your conference, was quite an amazing feat. So, yeah, I don't think Johnny gets enough credit for the work that he did at Iowa State. He went on and had a Hall of Fame career with Pittsburgh and Tennessee. He's in the Cyclone Athletic Hall of Fame. I think he was inducted there in the late 90s. But and he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame as a player. He was a great player, too. But, yeah, I don't think he gets enough credit. So I'm really glad that Payne did the deep dive and the digging on Johnny. And even if you're not an Iowa State football fan, if you're just a fan of the game and you can appreciate someone who put in the time and the work to do things the right way, you'll like this story.
And again, it really makes the point about what we see 6 times a year in Iowa History Journal. Now, there's much more in the magazine than what we covered, but we've talked about band leader Glenn Miller, actress Nedra Volz, and football coach Johnny Majors. That shows a bit of diversity of topics right there, to be sure. There's also something that we should mention that happens every year about this time, and it's stock-up time and Christmas shopping time there at the old Iowa History Journal barn, is it not?
It is. Every September and October, we host our annual back issue sale. All of our back issues are 50% off. We've talked about this before. We have many readers. Our readers love to collect every issue. This is a magazine that does not get thrown away. People keep it. They pass it on to their kids, their grandkids. It's a great time to fill the holes in your collection if you have any holes in your collection. We're in our 16th year now of publishing, Jeff. The first 2 years are sold out. Most of the third year is sold out. We have very few copies left from years, 3, 4, 5. And so it's a good time to pick them up now. Most of them only sell for $5, so now they're on sale for $2.50. You can't even buy the new issue for that on the rack. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it this way, if you missed a year, you can get 6 issues times $2.50. I mean, that's less than a 1-year subscription currently. So I encourage folks to visit our website, go to our online store. That sale starts the 1st of September, goes through the end of October, and it's the only time we do it. And people do know when we do it because we see quite a response, and we're hoping to have the same kind of reaction again this year.
And if you have the full collection, and I'm pleased to say I do, they're just tremendous. But if you think about an issue that you read a year ago or 3 years ago or whatever, this is the great time to get a second copy to send as a gift to someone. And, a gift subscription is a pretty good thing at Christmas time, and you could buy one of these or 2 of these back issues and wrap those up along with a little note saying that there's a gift subscription coming. It's not a bad way to get your Christmas shopping done, is it?
It's pretty easy, especially just with a touch of the button. So, yeah, we have folks who do that. They love to do that. Exactly what you said. Buy some back issues, and that gives them something physical to wrap up, and then they tell that gift recipient to look in their mailbox for the next year to see what's coming.
What posters are remaining?
Just a couple of from our early issues of George Reeves as Superman, John Wayne, and Niall Kinnick. And I only have a couple of John Wayne posters left. Not very many of any of them, quite frankly. I think maybe less than 10.
And again, the posters were done very limited, just with a few different issues. And so if you're interested, and again, some of these are the iconic photos. The Niall Kinnick one, which I think may have graced the first cover of the first issue ever. I mean, that's those things are suitable for framing. And now at 50% off all back issues and posters. And where do you go? You go to iowahistoryjournal.com. Michael Swanger, it is always a pleasure when I see the magazine show up in the mailbox. It's a greater pleasure when we get to talk about it. Thanks for the time today.
I appreciate it as always. Thank you, Jeff.
IowaHistoryJournal.com is where you go. Again, Barnes & Noble, Hy-Vee, so many other places. And the new issue of Iowa History Journal, September-October issue with Glenn Miller on the cover. This is where Iowa comes to talk. News Talk 1540, KXEL.